2024 has been quite the year for the Bluetti portable power station lineup. As part of their major upgrades this year, they started with the AC2A, which is a very small ultra portable power station, followed by the more robust AC70. But there's been a hole in the lineup for the last several months, and now that gap in the lineup has been filled with the brand new Bluetti AC50B. You see, the AC50B fills the hole in the Bluetti lineup that is the perfect size for the weekend camping adventure without breaking your budget. The AC50B fills the hole in the sweet spot of what used to be considered about the 500-watt portable power station. So although this power station has a slightly smaller 446 watt-hour battery, it has a massive AC inverter rated at 700 watts of continuous load, or up to 1000 watts in powerlifting mode. That means that you will be able to power even more of your small off-grid camping appliances with the AC50B than any other comparable 500 watt power station. Bluetti sent me this power station for a test and review on my channel. They did not pay me to say anything, and they have no control over any of the content inside the video. To help keep my channel independently operated, please consider subscribing, and let's get on with the video. So for today's video, we're gonna test all of the features as we go, starting with putting a little bit of solar power into this power station. The AC50B can handle up to 200 watts of solar power at a maximum open circuit voltage of 28 volts and 8.5 amps. So I've got my 200 watt solar panel laid out here in the sun. This is an XT60i cable that I have going into it. The input from the 200 watt solar panel jumped straight up to 150 watts. But now that I've got a little bit of shade on the corner of that solar panel, I'm getting about 125. So I'm gonna adjust that solar panel one more time, see if I can get it completely out of the shade and into the sun to maximize this little Bluetti's DC input capability. So I'm gonna jump straight up to the 700 watt capability of this power station. Now, this little water boiler does take about 550 watts, and this thing spikes at about 250. So combined, these two things will pull up to 800 watts. Turn on the water boiler and turn on the heat. We never truly spiked up to 800 watts. However, I am happy to see that I hit the 700 watt limit, and we're running at just under 700 watts, which is essentially what this power station is rated to run at anyway. So at this rate, I'm currently putting in 140 watts from the solar panel. I'm pulling out 660 watts from the two AC devices. And at this rate, I will run for about 12 minutes, which would be just enough time to boil water with the water boiler. However, I would actually never run a small heater like this off of a power station of this size. So for that reason, I'm gonna go ahead and shut this off and allow that water to continue boiling. So I can already hear the water starting to boil. I took the heater out, and this is something more realistic. Perhaps in the morning, I wanna boil something, maybe some oats, and then cook some eggs at the same time. So between these two devices, I am pulling currently about 800 watts. So let's see if I can handle this for a few minutes. And if not, then I'm gonna put it into powerlifting mode, and that should be able to handle both of these devices at the same time. I was sitting here a little skeptical that the power station could not handle this 800 watt load, but so far it's been running for over a minute. The egg boiler has started to boil. I'm essentially achieving my goal of cooking a hot breakfast with this perfect Goldilocks size Bluetti AC50B. So 800 watts was a little too good to be true, but it lasted like that for at least 3 minutes. So I'm gonna call that a win at the 700 watt rating. And if I really needed to, I could boil my water and boil my eggs separately using this power station. And you can see that I have triggered the overload features on the AC inverter, but it is definitely still accepting its solar power. So let's reset the AC inverter. I paired the app to the device. I do have multiple Bluetti power stations, and I've made a lot of reviews where I talk about the Bluetooth app, so I'm not gonna get into too much detail on it today. However, I am gonna use the app to activate the powerlifting mode. With powerlifting mode enabled, let's try to run these two devices one more time. While these things heat up again, let me explain a little bit about how powerlifting mode works. First, you have to be using it with resistive loads. So in this case, these two devices pull a lot of heat. They pull electricity and convert it essentially into a heating coil or heat in a heating coil. Because of that, those are resistive loads. And I want to show you that although the two devices were pulling about 800 watts combined, what is happening is the voltage is dropping, increasing the amperage, making the devices thinking that they're getting the proper power, but I am in fact only getting 700 watts out of the AC inverter. And I do have a 1000 watt device I'm going to pull out in just a second to see how it performs when it's maxing out that powerlifting mode. So this little mini pot here is rated to take a maximum of 1000 watts, and it is adjustable from 200, 400, 600, 800, and 1000 watts. And so what I'm going to do in the next few minutes, first of all, is allow my power station to get a little more power into it before I try to run that pot and see how long or if it will run at 1000 watts and boil water. As I'm bringing in some more solar power, let me talk about the DC outputs. First, I am a little surprised that there are two 65 watt USB-C outputs. And the reason this surprises me is both the AC2A and the AC70 have at least one 100 watt USB-C output. So for some reason we have two 65 watt USB-C outputs here. Now that could possibly be a good thing if, for example, I could get 65 watts out of both of these at the same time, then that's about 130 watts out of the outputs. However, this would not allow me to achieve some of those maximum rated inputs for some of the small devices that I might find myself plugging into this power station. It does still have one old 2000 era USB-A rated at 15 watts. We also have a standard 10 amp 12 volt outlet with a decent cover on it. Now Bluetti claims that you'd be able to run something like a portable mini fridge from this power station for about 6 hours. But if you're familiar with some of the testing that I've done in my channel, then you would know that if you start your mini fridge with the contents pre-cooled, a power station of this size can run a mini fridge for at least 24 hours and up to 48 hours. The shade did move over the solar panel. However, I was able to get about 38% into the battery over the last hour. And so what I'm going to do is reposition this so I can continue to maximize that solar power. And then we'll test out this kettle with this power station. Let's test that DC output to see if we can get more than 65 watts from these two devices combined. So I'm going to start with the smaller MacBook, plug that in and see what we get. So we're getting 52 out of the MacBook Air. I'm not sure if that's the maximum draw that this computer is capable of. However, I do know that this cable going into my MacBook M2 will pull quite a bit more power. So between the two devices, I'm pulling about 110 watts, which is definitely more than 65 watts. Let me try just my MacBook Pro, the M2, see what we get out of that. With my most powerful laptop, I'm pulling about 60 watts. And I know that with this cable, I can pull about 140 watts using the supplied power brick. So I would say 60 watts is an accurate output for this power station. And if you hook up two devices together, around 110 to 120 is achievable from the DC USB-C outputs. We're still bringing in a pretty steady 140 watts from the solar panel, and I've got 40% of battery life. So let's go ahead and get some water boiling with this electric pot. The AC50B is in powerlifting mode, so let's get started with 200 watts. So this thing is rated right now to pull 200 watts. Jumped pretty much straight up to 200 watts on the AC outlet. So that's a go. Let's go to 400. No problem. Every increase that I have done with the stove has also incrementally increased the sound of the fan. That means that the fan will attenuate based on the load within the power station. 600 watts, no problem. Let's hit that 800 watt rating. And at the 800 watts, just like we saw in the other test, we should stick to around the 700 watts. So now what I want to do is restart this test from the beginning, but this time I want to set the pot straight to 1000 watts and see if it can handle it. This little pot shows how long it's been cooking for, so if the power station cannot handle this 1000 watt load, I'll know about when it shuts off by using this timer. Like we discussed earlier, when you're using powerlifting mode, the true output of the device is still going to be that 700 watts. So right now I am putting out 700 watts, although this thing thinks that it's getting 1000 watts. I've got about a half a quart of water in the pot, and normally this takes maybe 3 to 5 minutes to boil. So we will see if this half quart of water will boil within that time. And in fact, I can already see some of the bubbles on the bottom of this pot, meaning that the boiling process is already starting. So at just about 4 minutes, the water started boiling. So that's absolutely a success on powerlifting mode for boiling water. The Bluetti AC50B does have a lithium iron phosphate or LFP battery inside. That is the current gold standard of battery technology for portable power stations, mainly because it is rated for about 3,000 complete discharge cycles with at least 80% of its effective battery capacity remaining. For the everyday user, that means that this would have plenty of battery capacity remaining after almost 10 years of use. So let's head into the studio and check out the rest of this power station's features. Inside the box, you get the Bluetti AC50B. You also get this XT60 to 12 volt DC charging cable. This is perfect for charging the device with your car. Of course, you get your standard wall charging cable. The interesting thing about these newer power stations is they have a dual rated AC inverter, meaning that the Bluetti lineup does not require any external power brick like some other older style power stations. Finally, we do have our XT60 to MC4 cable adapter. This is similar to what I use to hook up my solar panel out there. This is included in the box, and a lot of newer power station companies have stopped providing these two cables inside of the box. So that's an added value when you purchase the AC50B. Now this thing is by no means heavy. It tips the scales at 14.7 pounds or 6.7 kilograms. Although the literature says it's 11 inches wide, I measure it at 10.5 inches. Just under 8 inches deep and just under 9 inches tall. In addition to that, Bluetti claims you can get up to 80% in 45 minutes by charging through the wall cable. The AC50B has 3 charging modes. In silent mode, you'll bring in about 170 watts. Bumping it up to standard mode will give you about 270 watts max. And then bumping it up to turbocharging mode gives you a somewhat aggressive 580 watts of power into the device. Using turbocharging mode will give you a complete charge from 0 to 100% in 70 minutes. However, if you don't need such an aggressive way to charge the device, I do recommend either using the silent or standard mode. As you reduce the amount of power going into the device, you do also reduce the amount of heat that is being created with that power transfer. The AC50 also has UPS mode, which is uninterruptible power supply with a transfer rate of about 22 milliseconds. In addition to all of the other recent offerings, the Bluetti AC50B also has a pure grounding cable. That means that if you do want to set this up somewhere, you can run a grounding cable, making this a much safer alternative in the event of a serious overload of the system, which could cause a shock. The Bluetti AC50B launches this week with a very special early bird price of $299. In addition to that, I have a discount code in the video description. So check the video description for the latest updates and current pricing of this portable power station. If you found this video useful, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you in my next episode.